Hi guys, it is Ryan here from Disney Pin Love. No Laura today, although she'll probably help me with some editing and putting this together. But this is a little bit of a passion project for me, I suppose. Something that I've wanted to do for a long, long time, more than a decade probably. So this is a bit of a selfish indulgence, I suppose, and it's completely non Disney related, so I'll preface that for you. But I've been inspired by some other vlogs that we've been watching recently where, people talk about goals and they're doing trip planning and they're sort of thinking about these bucket list experiences. And I feel like I've sort of been really, really fortunate and got to do something similar myself. And I've talked about it before in passing on the channel. But when I say this is selfish, I feel like I'm doing it more for myself. I'm not sure if it'll have a lot of entertainment value for anyone else, though hopefully we're going to give this a try. But I want to look back at some of my travel pictures and do a bit of a narrated slideshow. So it'll be a nice trip down memory lane, for, for me at least, and just something that'll help me preserve these memories because it's been a while, so things are starting to slip. Anyways, I'm just looking down at some notes because I want to keep this as crisp as possible. But this is going to be, again, sort of a look back on this really wonderful, to use a cliche, life changing experience that I got to have, something that really broadened my horizons and that I'm so thankful for. So, this is going to be a narrated slideshow. And this is an experience that I got to have through, my work at the time. So just to orient you and give you a bit of context, this goes back to a trip that I got to take for work, and I left on May 15th, 2009, and returned in October. So I was gone for about 5 or 6 months there, and it was exactly 1 week to the day after I turned 22 years old that I was leaving, and it was like 2 weeks after I had finished my last university exam. As far as the job, it was something that I was doing part time throughout university. I started in my second year, and then once I was done school, I started doing it full time. So yeah, this all sort of coincided with me, finishing school, switching to full time, and just freshly turning 22, I suppose. So on this trip, I was sent to Manila, which is the capital of the Philippines. It was to do some training and business analysis work at an office we had over there. I was there, like I said, for the 5 months time, and I really tried to make the most of it. So I also got to do some other travel in the region while I was there. On two separate long weekends, I went to Thailand. I went to Vietnam, and then in the middle of my time away, I spent about a week and a half in Japan. So I want to make this a 4-part series where I focus on the Philippines first, and then a video each for Thailand, Vietnam, and Japan. So the only thing I'll say before I get started is just sorry for all of the things that I'm going to mispronounce. Hi, and welcome back. Thank you for joining me for the final installment of this series. Today we will be taking a look at Vietnam. So this was my final little, side trip away from Manila, the Philippines. And I did this one solo, and it was the Labor Day long weekend in September. So I had 3 full days in Saigon, which is in the south of Vietnam, and after the Vietnam War, it's now referred to as Ho Chi Minh City. So compared to Thailand, where I was, slumming it a little bit, but still a pretty nice joint. In Saigon, I spent a little bit more money on a hotel, so that is what we're seeing here with the first picture. This is inside of the hotel. It's a covered courtroom, and that's the view looking down. So that's actually not my favorite, my favorite thing, but it was really impressive nonetheless. Here is a rooftop pool that this hotel had. I don't think that I ever got in. I probably didn't bring a bathing suit for a little 3-day trip. But very nice, and it was cool to hang out up there anyways. This is in the room. And this is interesting. So when I landed in Vietnam, I took out 900,000 Vietnamese dong. At least at the time, the Vietnamese dong, that's their currency, it was like the lowest valued currency in the world. So although that sounds like I was quite rich, at the time it was something like 17 to 18,000 dong to get $1 American. That's how it worked out. So if we do some quick math, if we are conservative and use 17,000 dong to $1 American, you can actually see the remaining balance in my checking account there. So if it costs me 17,000 to get $1, it costs me 170,000 to get $10, and it would cost 1.7 million to get $100 American. So you can see here at the time, still sort of starving student mode, my checking account balance was just over $200 American. So yeah, I was waiting on payday, that's for sure. Here is some Vietnamese currency, which I just thought was so interesting. It's pretty cool to walk around and have 100,000, a bill of that size in your wallet. Like I said, though, it would be worth about $6 American, but that goes pretty far in Vietnam, especially at the time. So that's a shot of the front and back of the 100,000 dong note. Cars were still not super all over the place in Vietnam at the time. Scooter is the best way to get around. And this is where I started. The first thing I did, this is called the Jade Emperor Pagoda. So in Vietnam, they call them pagodas. In Thailand, it was Wats. In Japan, it's temples. But this is a little religious site, and you'll see turtles. Turtles are quite revered in Vietnamese culture. So Jade Emperor Pagoda, it's sort of an interesting, I believe the religion is called Cao Dai. It's a newer religion, relatively speaking, and it blends, I'm oversimplifying, but what I was told was it's sort of like a third Buddhism, a third Hinduism, and a third Catholicism. So an interesting sort of combo, and personally, we're not really religious in any sense, Laura and I, but I am just very interested in checking out these sorts of things when they're just so different to what we would see in Canada for the most part. So that was a few shots around the pagoda. Here is the iconic Vietnamese flag just on the side of the street, and I've made it to the War Remnants Museum. So this is showcasing, what Americans call the Vietnamese War and what the Vietnamese would call the American War. And unfortunately, the Vietnamese, they were at war quite a lot in the 1900s. They were first occupied by the French, and at that point, Vietnam was sort of referred to as Indochina. Then the Japanese invaded and occupied most of Vietnam during World War II. And then, of course, there was the Vietnam, also known as the American War, depending on your perspective. So this is in South Vietnam, where South Vietnam was not communist. South Vietnam was allied with America. And, of course, the communists in North Vietnam did win the war, and what we're seeing here is some things that remained that they sort of have on display. So interesting exhibits inside. There were some really sad and frankly gory photos. I'm not going to show you any of those, but it was a very moving exhibit. So just a few of the things that were around. Here's a series of sculptures, and I think a lot of them do a great job of depicting the unpleasantness of any war. Here's just a few more things that they had. This is, I believe, what a prison camp would have looked like in the era. So this is, people could be placed under something like that, so you wouldn't have a lot of room to move. They did have a few wax. I'm not sure what they were made out of, but I'll call them wax figures, just sort of illustrating the conditions. And that was the end of the museum. And, at least on paper, Vietnam is still a socialist or communist kind of nation. Like I said, scooters everywhere. So this is the Independence Palace as it was known. Again, I'm in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, the south of Vietnam. So this was the side that was not victorious in the war. But this would have been the palace of the South Vietnamese president. This was also the site of the fall of Saigon. So the tank would have crashed through those gates, and that was, if memory serves, April 30th, 1975. That was 13 days after Cambodia, so Vietnam's neighbor Cambodia, it fell to the Khmer Rouge, the communists in Cambodia, on April 17th. So an interesting site. It was just neat to walk through. There's a lot of ceremonial kind of rooms. That's a bust of Ho Chi Minh, who was the main man in the north representing the communist side. This is probably a situation room, pool table. This looks almost sort of swanky for the 60s and 70s. This was maybe a more leisurely space, and some of it just, it takes me back to sort of like James Bond movies from the same era, just the look and feel of some of the things in this building. And yeah, that was, a model or replica of the last helicopter out when Saigon fell. In the basement, some telecommunications gear, of course, from the 1970s, like our cell phones could do so much more than any of that stuff. An industrial kitchen. They had, some vehicles that would have been there in the garage at the time. And the Independence Palace had a shooting gallery as well. Nobody could actively shoot there at this point. What you're seeing now is Notre Dame Cathedral of Saigon. Again, because of that French occupancy in the early 1900s, you definitely have some Catholic representation in the country. So just a beautiful, stunning building. Speaking of stunning buildings, and again, I guess something that the French did leave behind in Vietnam is just gorgeous colonial style architecture. So this is the post office. There's a portrait of Ho Chi Minh and just a few shots around the post office, which is just in a gorgeous building. And this is the Saigon Opera House. So again, another beautiful example of that French colonial architecture. This is where I had lunch, the Caravel Hotel, which was apparently quite famous with the Western journalists during the Vietnam War. Saigon Bar is, I guess, very famous and iconic. It was a popular haunt for those journalists that were covering the war. Apparently, it had bulletproof glass all around, so it was, a relatively safe place to enjoy a beer. And that's exactly what I did. And that's my view from Saigon, the bar, looking at the opera house, and just a few other shots from that vantage point. There's a Vietnamese flag flying. I nipped into the Ben Thanh market, which is, again, pretty famous, pretty iconic, all sorts of stuff for sale. I didn't buy a thing, but just wanted to at least give it a walkthrough. For dinner, when in Vietnam, of course, one must have some pho. So there it is. I remember it being quite delicious, and it's always a treat. And again, some more beer, naturally. After dinner, I found this bar, and this is, shows in a sense how long ago that war was. Because here we have a bar named Yoko, as in John and Yoko. This is the back of the card, quoting a lot of Beatles songs. When you find yourself in times of trouble, take a sad song and make it better. Sometimes you need somebody to get your feet back on the ground. Say help, and you will see there are many good people around you. So it's better to open up your doors. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Or sometimes you need a place to hide away. Come here right away. There's a winding road that leads you to our door. So at least, 5 Beatles songs and a John Lennon song in there. And their menu was on sort of like a vinyl sleeve. Super, super cool. A portrait of John Lennon over the drum set. There's a tree in the bar, which I just thought was cool. It was sort of like a split level kind of situation. So you see an upper level on the right, and the band just rocking out. So, just so I just thought this was like the coolest thing. And there's a cool spot to leave your Heineken, I guess. I drank mine. So this is day 2. This is the famous Mekong Delta. I signed up to be a part of a tour, and this was a very nice tour. So getting to explore life on the Delta. So having a boat chartered, there were a few other tourists. Like I said, I was by myself this trip, but it was just cool to meet some other people who were in Vietnam and wanting to see the same things for a day. Of course, flying the Vietnamese flag off the back of the boat. And just life on the Delta. It was really just interesting to see the people that live and work there. There's a church that would have been built right on the water. There's a floating market. People would go boat to buy things. This was a snack that we had on our boat, which was absolutely delicious. Some tea and some local fruit. And again, just more life on the Mekong Delta. We got off to check out a rather stately home from the 1930s. And the mother of pearl work on all of the furniture was just jaw-dropping. I'm not saying that I would want the piece in my house, but just they do the same thing with inlays on guitar necks. So to see, something that I was sort of familiar with in a different context, it really is quite an art form. And just neat to see this stately home and get to sort of walk through it. Local fruit in the yard. Back on the boat and a bit more exploring, we make one more stop before lunch. So this is some rice paper and how that's made. There it is drying. This is some sort of rice being popped, so a little bit similar to popcorn. And some famous snake wine. And that one looks like there's a cobra and a scorpion together at last. So you can just reach for that red cup, take a shot, and that'll put some fire in your veins. And that was the marvelous boat crew, just as we were departing for lunch in this, again, beautiful, likely old colonial-style home. So love the covered porch, the big veranda, beautiful furniture. Love all the green sort of trim and awnings. We went upstairs. It was all open air. Had a beautiful little salad appetizer here, and then you'll see some fish. And they served the fish to us like that, which was really cool to see. They were kind to us. They got all the fish off the bone, so we didn't have to deal with that. And you'd sort of make like a rice paper wrap that was absolutely delicious. So that was the staff who was working there in their ao dai, which is sort of traditional Vietnamese garb for women, an ao dai, I believe it's called. Look, a cow. Okay, this is my third day in Vietnam, and I wanted to check out the Cu Chi tunnels, which are about an hour away from downtown Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City, and it's a part of the Vietnam War history. It's a very intricate tunnel network. So this is a cross-section sort of depicting, again, just how intricate the tunnel network is. This was something that was used by the North, so the Viet Cong. They dug the tunnels to mount surprise attacks against the Americans as well as the South Vietnamese forces. So it was just this way that they could appear almost out of nowhere, evade capture, and mount these surprise attacks. This is just a shot to illustrate how well camouflaged the entrances and exits to the tunnels are. And here's somebody illustrating just how one may hide. So there you see him, and now you don't, and there he is again. Quite an impressive feat, especially considering my sandal wouldn't even fit through that hole. Here's the entrance to one of the tunnels, which I believe was a little bit enlarged for Western tourists. I did crawl through it. The lady in front of me, tiny, I had to literally be on my hands and knees. I guess I'm a bit of a bigger guy, and I cut up my knees pretty good, actually. I was not a fan. I wouldn't normally say I'm claustrophobic, but I was not so happy down there, but I did make it to the other end. I think it was like 100 yards, which is a bit. Yeah, that's some sort of nasty bug. And then a lot of booby traps they had examples of that were used during the war. So that is a sticking trap. You wouldn't want to step on that. Wouldn't want to step on that one either. A rolling trap. A window trap, a slipping armpit trap. That one looks especially unpleasant. You would not want to fall on that. A seesaw trap, and a door trap. So a great variety of traps on display. And this is a bombed out tank. So an American M41 tank that was destroyed by a landmine in 1970, so 5 years before the fall of Saigon. Again, some more mannequins on display. I guess this is demonstrating what life would have been like during the war, and if you did have to hide out in the tunnels. In the very first image I think I had of the tunnels, they were depicting babies were born in the tunnels. There were hospital, you could get medical care. It was really an extensive kind of thing. I took the opportunity, one of those win in Rome kind of things, to fire off a few live rounds from an AK-47. I had done some marksmanship in high school. That was a sport that was offered, and honestly, it was sort of a scary experience for me. I did not like the feeling, just the power, and even with ear protection, the noise was a bit much. So here we are back in Saigon. I always call it Saigon. I think that's cooler. Like I said, it is known as Ho Chi Minh City these days, and there is Ho Chi Minh himself in front of essentially the city hall, and another stunning example of that French colonial architecture. Just absolutely breathtaking. The Opera House facade again, and someplace I had lunch. I think I had a delicious French meal. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of the food. I think it cost me a whopping $3, or probably like 45,000 dong, to eat in this beautiful room. Look at the ceilings, the columns. I went to another local museum. This one was not specifically devoted to the war, but the war theme is sort of sprinkled throughout all museums to an extent, I think. A beautiful scene I stumbled upon, though, a bride and groom having some wedding photography done. Just some shots around the museum. And this is a scaled model of the Independence Palace, the helicopter on the top. That's where the tank would have crashed through in the fence. There's a picture of that. And again, some communist style imagery there, because they would have been seen as sort of liberators, if you will. So some more of that. This is representing the tunnels, which I did get to see just earlier in the day. So it was cool to see this sort of cross section at a museum later. And there's the bride and groom again. I think they were getting some photos in front of the beautiful building, and I was maybe just happened to, catch a glimpse when I was in an upper level of the museum. I forget what this is about, but I just love the frame because it reminds me of, it's very sort of stately, and it reminds me of something you might see in perhaps an American museum, and you'd expect to see an eagle at the bottom. But what is that? Not an eagle. That is a turtle, like I said off the hop. Very revered in Vietnamese culture. Some fashion, really, really beautiful. And some instruments absolutely caught my eye. So just getting to the end of the museum, as I said, they had some vehicles from the war era and a few more, I guess Army and military and Air Force vehicles that would have been true to the era. After that, I treated myself to an ice cream. Look at that, sundae. It's like a boat. It's got a sail and everything. Then checked out a Hindu temple very briefly and lit some incense and took my shoes off. Finally, waiting for a very late flight, I was back at my hotel. This is where that pool and rooftop bar was, just taking some shots of Saigon at night, and then I think just out for another stroll after dark, taking in the beautiful architecture. This is the Opera House again, all lit up, and the City Hall, once again, all lit up at night. So there we have it. If you've made it this far, even just in this video, or especially if you've watched the 3 preceding it, congratulations. Thank you for putting up with me. I hope I've not bored you with too slow of a pace or information that's not interesting to you. Like I said in the intro, though, this is something that I wanted to do primarily for myself, so it was a bit of a selfish act, but I just wanted to preserve these memories, and since we have this channel, I thought it may be a good medium to share them. So as I said, I hope you enjoy, and I just wanted to share this great bucket list kind of experience that I got to have. I feel so fortunate that through work I was able to spend some time in Asia, see a few of these countries, and make some wonderful friends as well. So definitely, something that broadened my horizons immensely and really set me on a course that changed my interests. The amount of nonfiction books I've read about the region since coming back from this vacation, the different foods I've tried, the things that I've wanted to learn about, and the countries that I want to travel to next and take Laura to as well. It all sort of started because of this, I would say. So I will wrap it up here. Thank you again.